Well, it's time now for the big story. This afternoon, there was a standoff between pro-Palestine and counter-protesters in London. It was the 11th march organised by the Pro-Palestine group. It was largely peaceful, but arrests were made for hate speech. And what was concerning was the amount of anti-Semitic videos which were posted on social media today. So here's just a few of the more troubling clips.
I fully support Hamas. They resisted the occupation. I fully support Hamas. They resisted the occupation.
Here in Britain, look at this. Take a picture of that. Who controls Britain? It's the Jewish people that control the Britain. 40% of the MPs are Jewish, and that's why these police are under there.
So are the pro-Palestine marches a platform for hate? Joining me now is the founder and director of Faith Matters, Fiyaz Mughal. Fiyaz, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Now, you saw some of the clips there. There's some very disturbing footage there. Someone suggesting that Jews run the country. Another suggesting that Hamas are worthy of support. Now, do you think this is just a few bad apples, or do you think there's a problem within the movement itself?
Well, I think there are some issues around elements of the movement. Clearly, this is not to say all of the protesters, very clear about that. But there are these threads that come through in these demonstrations where you have individuals coming and popping up, saying they support Hamas. So I think there is something around individuals being drawn who support Hamas to these kind of demonstrations. The second thing to say is also, I'm a libertarian by nature. The fact is, people can demonstrate and they have every right to demonstrate. The key thing here, though, is we've seen placards, we've seen symbols, we've seen language that makes our British Jewish communities feel scared and makes our British Jewish communities also report in. We're talking about hate crime, but actually report in anti-Semitic incidences that make or generate fear within large sections of our British Jewish community. So these things are unacceptable.
Now, I do want to emphasise a point you mentioned there, which is I would not for a second want to smear all of the people who are attending these marches. I'm sure that the majority of people there would find those kind of things abhorrent. I'm sure the majority of people there are genuinely concerned and upset by the distressing images we've seen in Gaza and the death of civilians. I think that's absolutely clear. But what worries me, though, is when you have elements of the marches where they are making statements like they support Hamas, why aren't the other people there addressing that, shutting that down, saying, no, you shouldn't be saying that here? I feel that sometimes that's evidence there's at least complacency from a lot of the people there when it comes to this stuff. Would that be a fair comment?
That would be a fair comment. Look, the fact of the matter is now it's been, maybe 4.5 months that support for Hamas has been made criminal. People are well aware now and should be well aware that it is a criminal offence. That's a starting point. Let's start with the criminality element. The second point is if they have any decency and they hear that, is to shut it down, because actually it's unacceptable. It's unacceptable for the sake that our British Jewish communities feel so threatened by the language. It's unacceptable because Hamas invaded Israel on the 7th of October and carried out mass atrocities. These things are not on. You can demonstrate, absolutely, but we need people to be also shutting these kind of comments straight down by actually saying, look, you either leave the demonstration right now or I will report you to the police. That's the way to tackle these individuals and not just allow them to voice their toxic support for Hamas.
Wouldn't it be maybe a strategically progressive move for some of the main figures within the pro-Palestine protest movement to make sure that in these marches they are openly denouncing Hamas? I mean, Hamas, I would argue, are the worst thing to have ever happened to the Palestinian population. Why are they not coming out and saying, we denounce Hamas, we denounce what took place on October the 7th, and start from that position?
Well, I think that's a fair point. They can put a public statement out, whether it's on a website or in the public domain using social media platforms. They need to put a statement out, I believe, because, the legitimate protests about what's happening in Gaza need to be, in a way, marked out from those who keep quiet about this kind of, in a way, insidious, I would say, underlying support for some of the violent tendencies, i.e. support for Hamas. There needs to be a clear demarcation for those peaceful protesters who want to protest and actually I would say, somewhat a silent nature of the demonstrators who allow for this kind of behavior and comments to carry on. But the fact of the matter is, it's a clear line. There's no two ways about it. It's a criminal offence in this country. And actually, we need to have a statement that says this group is unacceptable. We're not demonstrating for this kind of group. We're demonstrating for the Palestinians. And that kind of public note needs to be put out across social media or their websites.
Do you think that there's any merit in the argument that there has been a kind of two-tier policing going on, that the police have maybe been a little bit... Now, I know there were arrests today, but that in the past there's been a bit too much tolerance when it comes to this kind of thing, but then the police have been particularly severe when it comes to other issues, such as misgendering or something like that. Do you think there's anything to that?
I think the police took an approach. They didn't want to get involved, certainly in the demonstrations early on. Do I think that was the right move? The answer is no, because it had an impact, again, a significant impact upon the perception of safety within our British Jewish communities. That's why it was the wrong move to take it. First of all, the second reason it's wrong is because you have to apply the law equally. You have to apply it equally across communities. And so the law exists. It needs to be properly implemented. The fact is, today in our country, many people say, look, here's the law, why are you not implementing it? We hear that repeatedly, time and time again. The law is clear. We don't need more laws. There are numerous existing laws in our country, but the fact is the police need to implement it properly. I would also say politicians need to invest more in our policing to make sure they implement the laws in practice.
One of the things that concerns me slightly is that when these kinds of things happen, they give succor and ammunition to the kind of people who say, let's ban the marches altogether. And I would be very concerned about, I think that would affect all of us, because I think the right to peaceful protest applies to us all, irrespective of our stance on this position.
Totally right. Look, I will stand for the right for anyone to demonstrate whether I like their opinion or not. It is a fundamental, sacrosanct value of our democratic society, all right? Everyone has the right to demonstrate peacefully. That is a right. I would also say, I think we need to make clear that government can't go around heavily policing certain demonstrations and allowing other demonstrations to get away scot-free, right? And I go back to the point. The applicability of the law needs to be equal, but it must not transcend the individual right to protest in our country. That is a fundamental, sacrosanct nature of the value of our country.
Well, it's a fascinating topic, and I'm sure we'll see further developments as we go on. Well, Fiyaz Mughal, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Pleasure.